a member of the Nanticoke Indian tribe, which was originally located on the eastern shore of Maryland. Now we have been moved to Millsboro, Delaware, and everywhere else in the world due to colonization. Our whole being as Native people has been based off the 7 generations principle. Every decision that's made, I know within my community and many other communities that I've visited, is based off of how that will impact the next 7 generations. So when I have the Piscataway people, particularly our Piscataway women, that send a call out for help, we come and we support our women. This project, having doing research on it, is not conducive to what Georgetown University is supposed to represent. My wife is an alumnus of Georgetown University, absolutely disgusted by this, disgusted that there was no input put towards the alumni and significant donors to the university. But as you have seen, particularly in Southern Maryland, industry that allows for deforestation has been devastating to your community. Look what happened with the tobacco fields. They came over, they exploited a resource that has been sacred to us for thousands of years, and it ruined our fields. You look at the waterways, okay? When will the big industries understand that without clean water, there is no life? Native people are water protectors. We stand up for the land. We care about the land. The land is part of us. Ownership, fencing, none of that stuff was practiced prior to colonization. So we ask, how many more times do we have to make major mistakes before we realize that maybe the Native perspective that has been here for well over 16,000 years may have something to do with it? When is big industries and prominent universities going to say, hey, why don't we show respect to the local indigenous people and see if they want to be involved in this project? Let's see their living conditions. Why don't we approach minority people and see how can we help them? How can we help the disenfranchised, those that don't have a voice? These are questions that I ask. Now, we have to fight this fight because we missed some steps in the way, but I ask that you deny this permit based on the fact that there are plenty of other options that we can utilize. The technology with solar energy is profound. There are window panels that you can use that will create solar energy. There's rooftops. There's farmland that's already been cleared. There's industrial sites that people have talked about. The gravel pit was a good idea. I ask that you find alternative motives. To the landowners, I know some of them had already left, but there's plenty of other ways to get money off of your land. There's 100-year leases that you can sign with the Native people to help you learn how to use the land. That's a way of giving back. And you can give me this 3-minute thing all you want, but I've seen people come up here and take more time. I will take more time. I'll just be honest with you. But for far too long, we've sat back and we've seen people not respect the land. We've seen governments not respect the land. You have people that have been here for thousands of years that are telling you have to do a better job, and that there's ways to do it, and there's education that can be involved with it. And we ask that you respect that, and we ask that people at Georgetown University demand change.
Then after Ms. Lewis, Harry Rupert, then Hal Delaplane, and Steve Brennan.
Thank you. My name is Ann Lewis. I'm president of City Wildlife in Washington, D.C. I live at 3400 Reservoir Road, Northwest in Washington, 1 block from Georgetown University. We have serious concerns about the location of this project, even though we commend Georgetown for its efforts to create renewable energy sources. The project's originator, Aegis, is justifying this project on the basis of carbon sequestration, yet that is only one aspect of the value of these woodlands, and it negates all the other aspects. Justifying this project solely on the basis of carbon sequestration is a flawed analysis. Nanchimoy is well known for its biodiversity and exceptional wildlife habitat. It's also an important economic generator for the county, and I speak to that as a summer in Nanjemoy for 6 years with my family. It's a destination for birders, naturalists, scientists, and specialists in environmental research. The Nature Conservancy and the Audubon Society have both identified the area as prime conservation area, in part because of its large amount of contiguous forest. The Nature Conservancy deems Nanjemoy one of Maryland's most pristine watersheds and states that this remarkable situation exists in part because the landscape has not been fragmented as it has in other places. Likewise, the Audubon Society identifies the area as the green thumb of southwestern Charles County because of its large block of contiguous forest. This is the exceptional biodiversity and the uninterrupted forest habitat that supports it are why Nanjemoy is so unusual and considered so valuable by so many people. Forests also contribute to water quality, and I'd like to submit 2 documents for the records. My testimony is already part of the record, but the 2 documents are the value of forest conservation for water quality protection. It's a footnote in my testimony. And the other is a document from Canada on the complexities of, it's called Lessons Learned. Solar projects present unique stormwater management challenges. And if you want to read difficulties, read this.
22 seconds.
If implemented, this project and the decision-making process that enabled it would set a dangerous precedent locally and nationally by targeted forested areas rather than areas already developed as suitable sites for large solar farms. Over time, this could result in a significant reduction of much of our nation's forested land, as well as the many benefits that woodlands provide. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Rooker. I am a member of the Maryland Green Party, which will submit separate written comments. I came from Tacoma Park, Maryland, 804 Larch Avenue, north of DC, because what you do here affects me in Tacoma Park. It affects the 9,000 plus registered greens in the whole state of Maryland. It even affects the country and the world. As is my custom, I wish to open my remarks by acknowledging the land and its ancestors. So I honor the Piscataway ancestors of this land of the last 10,000 years plus, and their descendants who are still here today. The Green Party's 4 pillars are democracy, peace, social justice, and, you guessed it, environmental wisdom. The Green Party is likely the strongest supporter you can find of solar power. And yet, we oppose the Solar One project. An alternative site must be found that does not damage the environment nor contribute to climate change as this one does. Fragmenting a forest is one of the most destructive things you can do to a habitat. It cannot recover and dies slowly. The proposed destruction of this forest land harms a targeted ecological area that is home to 2 quality streams, habitat, biodiversity, and wildlife. The stream and wetlands workarounds mentioned in the presentation fail to protect those waters because you cannot meaningfully separate the waters from the land and trees. Altering the trees harms and alters the waters. It's called a trophic cascade. When we harm an ecosystem, we also harm human beings. We ask that you insist on a suitable location and reject the current proposal. We need more trees and forests, not fewer. We need reforestation, not deforestation. Coming from the DC area, I know how precious and valuable these forests are. I hope you cherish what you have here. Please don't take this sacred land for granted. Thank you.
Steve Brennan. And then Bonnie Vick.
Good evening. My name is Hal Delaplane of La Puebla, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Conservancy for Charles County, a charitable nonprofit land trust dedicated to preserving the rural character and natural assets of the county for the benefit of the general public. Thank you for holding this permit hearing tonight. While there is rightful concern with stream and wetland disturbance, which, while small in area, is not trivial, what really disturbs us is clear-cutting more than 200 acres of upland and bottomland hardwoods on a 537-acre tract with more than 100 feet of topographic relief and steep slopes down to a high-quality stream Ward's Run. The result would be a significant fragmentation of the Nanjemoy-Mattawoman Forest Hub and Greenway that would be inconsistent with the Charles County's 2016 comprehensive plan. The applicant belittles the quality of this forest. True, the forest on this tract is immature because of past logging, but that doesn't affect its function as a forest. The parcel is a targeted ecological area, meaning it is among the best of the best for preservation. The Department of Natural Resources Green Print assessed its conservation benefits and gave it 5 stars out of 5 for habitat connectivity, rare species and wildlife habitat, and proximity to protected lands. Further, in assessing its carbon sequestration, wildlife habitat and biodiversity, stormwater mitigation, groundwater recharge, nitrogen uptake, and air pollutants removed, Green Print values the property's ecosystem services at $624,133 per year. It does not appear any attempt at alternative analysis has been made to avoid damaging this landscape. Instead, the applicant relied on a special exception process that not only excluded public input, but also neglected to inform the public. Solar projects that need hundreds of acres of land amount to a major power plant and should be subject to comparable siting considerations in public process. According to the comp plan, there are more than 2,700 acres of extractive or barren land in the county. It would make sense to look here first.
You have 20 seconds.
What about a landowner's rights? Obviously, a mechanism is needed to provide a source of income for landowners as compensation for preserving essential ecosystem services. Perhaps something similar to the Conservation Reserve Program might work. Maryland cannot afford to stand idly by and allow a gold rush mentality to wreak havoc on competing societal needs for clean renewable energy and the preservation of green infrastructure and prime farmland. We need urgent action to resolve such land use conflicts. In the meantime, I ask Georgetown University to take responsibility and move this plant to a more appropriate location.
Good evening. I'm Steve Wood. I live in Walnut, Maryland. I own 75 acres in Nanjemoy. It's in the Forest Conservation Program. The state of Maryland has a forest conservation program which seems to be run as an alternative to allow developers to cut down trees elsewhere. Waldorf has been clear-cut thousands and thousands of acres over the last 40 years since I'm down here. I found out about this program by watching Channel 7 News, and Georgetown came up for discussion, and they said they were going to clear all these woods. This was a week after I watched a well-known national news person find out that her ancestor had been sold in Port Tobacco by Georgetown, sold south. So Georgetown has had a very good week in Charles County. That ancestor was born in Port Tobacco. This previous fellow mentioned Port Tobacco. Port Tobacco used to be a deep water port in colonial days. You can walk across the creek in Port Tobacco now because of all the erosion all the soil in Charles County that washed into Fort Tobacco Creek. We could see the same kind of effect happening in Angelina if you start cutting down all the trees there. So I'd just like to point out that we've been through this. You can see what happened in Fort Tobacco. We don't need this to be happening again in the Angelina area. And my 75 acres is going to stay wooded, even though it cost me a fortune to keep it that way. But I'm all for the wildlife, not for clearing the trees. Thank you very much.
And then Kathleen, looks like Kathleen Brophy.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody who's here because it's like the cream of the crop, as far as I'm concerned. People standing up for forests. It's something that we all need to do. We need to take recognition that the areas that we are familiar with and that our territory, we need to protect it. And I want a special thanks to the Native people that are here tonight because it's just your land that we are discussing here from the past. And it's so important to have your voice here tonight. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank MDE for holding this hearing because this project slipped by and people did not know about it. And we're very thankful that we have this opportunity. I would like the permit to be denied. I don't want MDE is in a critical perspective here because they can stop until there are regulations, which I do support, that will open up and green light solar in appropriate places. Paul Pinsky has legislation that would be very, very helpful, but it's not in effect yet. And so this land needs to be preserved, and there's an opportunity to preserve it. And I appeal to the heirs to switch from this deal that is actually, that all the information hasn't been presented. I was at the Board of Appeals and there was misinformation presented. I think it's admirable that Georgetown wants to meet their sustainable energy goals, but they have an opportunity to find a different company or get this company to do the right thing. But also, it would be wonderful if they would partnership with the conservation group that would like to purchase this property, because we would like to have Georgetown and the Smithsonian feel that this area below Washington is a benefit to them and help protect it. So I really think that that's a great opportunity for the future. And I would also like to say that, you know, we are all working together, and our mission is to save Ward's Run, the Ancient Point Creek, the Potomac River. I forgot the Mattawoman, which is amazing because I lived to save the Mattawoman, and the Chesapeake Bay. And I thank you all for taking such a serious look at this issue. Thank you. Thank you. We'll get more.
David Person of Tower Bridge Way. And then Kathleen Brophy. And then Valerie Crawford.
Good evening. My name is David Kirsten, and I'm the Director of Bird Conservation and Interim Executive Director of Audubon, Maryland, DC. We have around 23,000 members in the state, 411 of which live in Charles County. So Audubon opposes the solar projects in this particular place, and we urge MDE to deny a permit for it. We're not against solar power per se. In fact, we're very much in favour of it, and we applaud Georgetown University for pursuing solar power to reduce its carbon footprint. We recognise that climate change is one of the gravest long-term threats to birds and people, and we believe that developing renewable energy sources like solar is an essential strategy to combat climate change. But we oppose the project because it's simply in the wrong place and it will cause significant ecological damage to the two Tier 2 streams on the property and also to the largest forested landscape remaining in southern Maryland. This forested landscape we have identified as an Angelmoy important bird area, and we identified it because it has a really highly significant community of forest interior dwelling species of bird, and also significant populations of 6 at-risk bird species, bald eagle, whippoorwill, wood thrush, prairie warbler, promontory warbler, and worm-eating warbler. So the ecological damage needed to install the solar panels for the project is just not acceptable. We've heard about the clearance of 240 acres of forest and the fragmentation effects of that. And we've also heard about the need to grade and bulldoze the land, which would cause a lot of runoff and sedimentation into the streams. It's difficult to imagine a worse place to put this project, and it's difficult to understand how the site was selected. This level of ecological damage is totally unnecessary because there are so many more suitable sites across the states, even in Charles County, as we've heard other people say. I also want to say that it's, of all the issues that I've been involved with working with Audubon, this one's attracted more comment and passion than most others. And I think it's because people in Maryland are putting a lot of hope on developing renewable power to slow down climate change. And they really care that it's done right. We need to get the siting of these projects done correctly right now because there's going to be a lot more similar projects coming along in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Brophy. I request that you allow Dr. Gabby Tagg to speak in my place to allow as many members of the indigenous community of the Piscataway people to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for providing this opportunity for me to absolutely oppose the Sugar Valley Solar Project. My name is Dr. Gabrielle Taya. I am a Piscataway woman and a Harvard-trained scholar specializing in the indigenous history of our homeland, which includes the precious location now poised for destruction due to the misguided and irresponsible plans laid out by Georgetown University and the Oregon Solar Company. For informational purposes only, I would like you to know that I was a historian at the Smithsonian for 18 years. I educated millions of people about the history and culture and identity of our people and this beautiful, beautiful homeland that's here in Charles County. The project will only add to the more than 400 years of exploitation and degradation of our lands, our culture, and our self-determination. Nobody in this project insulted the tribes. I would remind you that the Piscataway tribes are officially recognized by the state of Maryland. Our traditional tribal area stretches from the area around Great Falls all the way down to Point Lookout between the Potomac and the Patuxent River. And I would like to say that my tribe is located primarily here, and I am a resident of Tacoma Park, Maryland, proudly. At the time of European contact, our chiefdom included dozens of tribes, and we lived in an environment composed of 95% old-growth forests, abundant agricultural fields, which I might add were controlled by women, and deep, clear waterways unaffected by erosion that comes with the vast deforestation that is now being planned. About 90% of our population was decimated by disease, displacement, and racism. Our reservation lands here were taken over without our consent. With all that we've gone through We are still here and our cultures are revitalizing. And I would like to point out that the woodlands are revitalizing. It is secondary growth in most places, but those are coming back. And all of our animal relatives, they're coming back, and that's a beautiful thing, and we don't want to waste that again. We are in a very vulnerable time in our country again. We are on the verge of another environmental catastrophe, and much of our natural world, which has had some time to recover, is now being threatened due to climate change and unrestrained development. We don't want more in the face of an institution which actually still holds one of the most precious things, our language, and for them to be involved in the taking away again of our lands, our culture, our environment, our relatives, our history, and our identity. Please do not allow this. Don't repeat this mistake again. Thank you.
Dave Wilson. Jessica Proctor.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Valerie Proctor, and I'm a lifelong resident of what is currently considered Charles County, Maryland, and I am a member of the Seafield Band of Piscataway. I strongly oppose the deforestation of over 200 acres of forest for the installation of Georgetown University and Origis' 32 megawatt solar project. I want to be clear that I am in full support of the university creating a solar project to power their campus. However, I strongly oppose the location of this project because it's in a community that was never consulted before the proposal. We will not be benefiting from the project here in Southern Maryland. This is for Georgetown University, not Southern Maryland. And this is my ancestral homeland, which my people have fought so hard for. And so many have died for, and have shed their blood, sweat, and tears for it, and we have shared with you all for centuries. And we just ask that you take care of it, and clear cutting more trees is not protecting it. And it's over 200 acres of it, which are in a targeted ecological area, a TEA. And I have a bone to pick with the county. Why would you even consider this a TEA? You're not even going to keep it protected. Anyway, despite the importance of this forest to the ecosystem of Southern Maryland and to the Piscataway community, Georgetown and Origis have not consulted the tribe in the process thus far. This is shocking considering that free, prior, and informed consent for indigenous communities is an internationally recognized human rights standard. Not only were we not consulted, neither were any of the Charles County residents. Just because this is a private piece of property does not mean it will not affect the others around it. This is a community. And those of us, for those of you who own the land, I realize this is your property and we need to do something with it, but we need you to please understand that this is the responsibility you hold when you hold such a precious piece of land. And it's not just a piece of land, it's an ecosystem. I support Georgetown's interest in solar infrastructure development, but I fail to see why it must happen in the destruction of forest land. Georgetown and Origis are encouraged to find other alternative sites, for instance, farmland that farmers could use as a cash crop, maybe in other counties, like Carroll County, for example.
18 seconds.
Again, I want renewable energy in Maryland, but not at the expense of my indigenous ancestral homelands. I'm deeply disappointed to see some of the same remnants of the same extractivist model used by the fossil fuel industry for years, already creeping its way into renewable energy development, and Origis should be embarrassed. We should not have to choose between one or the other, nature or renewables. We can and should have both. We deserve it. I'm thinking of the next 7 generations. Are y'all?
And after Mr. Wilson, Jessica Proctor, and then Angela Barnes.
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned, I'm Dave Wilson. I'm actually from Berlin, I drove 3.5 hours to be here. This is that important to me. I'll be in bed by 1 a.m., I hope. First, I'd like to thank MBE and Secretary Grumbles for holding this hearing. It's a very important part of the public process. It's important that this be a public process. And thank to all the 4 of you for hanging in there. Just for some background, the former executive director of the Maryland Coastal Base Program. It's a national estuary program that's based in Berlin, Maryland, where I worked for 18 years and where I also chaired the Coastal Base Forestry Advisory Committee. I worked with DNR and the Maryland Amphibian and Reptile on the Maryland Amphibian and Reptile Atlas and the Breeding Bird Atlas, where I logged over 2,000 hours in the field. And I subsequently helped write the conservation actions for the reptiles and amphibians and for the bird sections in the 2015 Maryland State Wildlife Action Plan. Since this is a wetland hearing, I'm going to be a good testifier and say that I think the degradations to the wetlands and the runoff impacts to the nearby Tier 2 streams are unacceptable, and therefore this permit should be denied. I'd also like to add that this would also set a very disturbing precedent in the state of Maryland for cutting down woods to put in solar panels. I'd like to also say that this Georgetown University proposal flies in the face of all the forest restoration work that the state and nonprofits across it do pretty much every day for everything from box turtles to scarlet tanagers. The biggest problem East Coast birds, reptiles, and amphibians have is the loss of contiguous forest habitat. Why even reduce greenhouse gases if you're going to destroy the habitat of the species you're trying to save? Greenhouse gas calculations are important, but they're not all that matter. When it comes to cutting giant holes in the few intact forest complexes left in the state, the number crunching is meaningless. I got my undergraduate degree from Penn State University, and I have a master's degree from Boston College. And I can't imagine any of those institutions ever being as poorly versed in wildlife, biodiversity, and conservation in general as Georgetown University is in this case. And the Florida-based Aegis Energies droning on about property rights and false trade-offs in the media doesn't make it any easier to swallow how Georgetown University ever got into bed with such an enterprise.
12 seconds.
It's easy to see Aegis Energy's blind financial incentive, but it's hard to comprehend Georgetown University's calculus on their institution's reputation. Thank you.
Jessica Proctor.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Jessica Proctor, and I grew up in Charles County, and I have lived here for nearly all of my life. I am, and always have been, connected to this land, as I am to a member of the Single Band Piscataway people. Pollution is toxifying our air, water, and land more and more each day. We are hurting for clean energy practices and for corporations to take the movement toward clean energy more seriously. I've seen our trees become rapidly wiped out by hundreds of acres over the past 15 years for housing developments, gas stations, shopping centers, and now what I hope would never happen, solar farms. Just like the fossil fuel industry has bulldozed small and vulnerable communities for decades, we are now beginning to see the same disgusting and disheartening practices from the renewable energy sector. There doesn't seem to have been any consideration from Georgetown University or Aegis for the ramifications of wiping out hundreds of acres of ancestral homelands of the Piscataway people and homelands of wildlife within this forest. Actually, by doing a quick Google search, it seems that Aegis has a history of choosing controversial sites and wiping out tons of trees in the process and endangering endangered species, even bird Georgetown University, I'm sure, has many brilliant minds, like those from the Green Organization that are here with us tonight, and others within your student body who I'm sure agree with us and would likely be willing to help find an alternative to killing trees and wildlife to build this solar farm. There are plenty of lands that have already been deforested that would make much more sense to use. The environmental benefits to Charles County from wiping out our trees and our source of oxygen and for clean energy to leave our state, our community, and be transferred to Georgetown and just to better your image for your university, there's no benefits for us.
20 seconds.
Although you'll be leaving the root system there, it will likely produce carbon emissions to deforest the site, install the solar farm, and maintain the area. It's a crude display of conspicuous consumption and a blatant disregard for the wishes of the Discovery people. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Barnes?
Hello, thank you. I'm Angela Barnes. I am here representing the Advocate Foundation, a nonprofit that's located in southern Prince George's County. I also would like to note that I am a longtime Charles County resident, as well as a member of the Piscataway County Cedar Bellwood family. In addition to the ecological impacts already noted this evening, we would like to echo the sentiment shared by the Native community and offer additional perspectives to be taken into consideration. In 2015, in collaboration with members of two state-recognized Piscataway tribes, the Advocate Foundation's board chair, Dr. Virginia Busby, co-published the Indigenous Cultural Landscape Study for the Neanjinoi and Mattawamie Creek watersheds. The purpose of this project was to identify and represent the indigenous cultural landscape for the Neanjinoi and Mattawamie Creek watersheds on the north shore of the Potomac River in Charles and Prince George's counties. The proposed solar project is situated within the study area. During the research, the cultural landscape study found that additional research is still needed to be able to more clearly establish connections between the historic and the contemporary Piscataway landscape. There is virtually no archaeological survey in the immediate and larger area. The level of historic property review is unknown and should be addressed for indigenous and other properties. It is important to note that the indigenous cultural landscape includes ecological and cultural resources. Biodiversity is exceedingly significant, and preserving contiguous large tracts within the ecological value that this property possesses is important. Historic problems of social and economic justice should compel Georgetown University to ensure that they embrace ecological justice in this instance. While we applaud the university's interest in embracing renewable energy resources, the decision-making and impact assessments must be informed by effective community discussions with the goal of doing no harm to human and ecological communities, protecting cultural resources, and respecting social justice. The Advocate Foundation respectfully requests that both Georgetown University and the appropriate agencies work with the Piscataway community, local stakeholders, and conduct archaeological surveys and research further the impact of this project on the irreplaceable environmental and cultural resources and indigenous resources of this region. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I want to mention that it's almost 9:40 and we have this room until 10 o'clock. We will not be able to get through our whole list of speakers tonight, so there will be a continuation of the hearing. But we'll call on a few more. And the next on the list, it looks like Erica.
Okay.
Thank you. And then Rebecca Turner.
Good evening, my name is Erica Mulcahy. I'm a relatively new resident to the area. I live on Smith Point Road in Neanjinoi, and I did move here because of the forests and the wildlife area. So that was very important for choosing this to be where I live. And I oppose the installation of a solar farm because it does really said it, I applaud Georgetown in their efforts to have solar and renewable energy, but I feel that they need to find a better site that is already cleared, install solar on their own facilities, upgrade facilities, that they have HVAC systems, employ daylighting, really achieve green energy instead of just saying, we're gonna clear cut a forest to have solar. So please deny their permit so we can keep our forest. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Gail Walker. Ms. Turner, Rebecca Turner. Gail Walker. Gwen Bagley.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Gwen Bagley from White Plains, Maryland. I grew up in Charles County. I often go out on the rail trail bike path. I often go out kayaking in Madeline Creek and in Nanjumoi Creek, and I always see many other people out there enjoying the environment in Southern Maryland. I'm absolutely opposed to this project, and I would ask that you deny the permit. I am concerned about the precedent this sets for future solar farms in Maryland, of which there will surely be many more. I think that appropriate sites, such as rooftops, brownfields, already graded land, canopies over parking lots, should be found for these sites before forested land is disturbed. And so I would ask that you deny the permit.
Thank you. Okay, the first name is Michael. Last name is Nepo?
Nephew.
Nephew. Could you do me a favor, sir, and spell your last name?
Pardon?
Could you spell your last name?
Nephew, N-E-P-H-E-W. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. And I'd like to acknowledge the Piscataway people, many of whom are my friends. They've been here for thousands of years and are still here. I actually applaud Georgetown in looking to go with green alternatives. I don't think this is the proper one to do. There's plenty of, actually, there's, like somebody else mentioned, there's plenty of areas that they have on their campus that they currently don't have solar on. There are areas that do have solar. I would prefer to see them put more solar on their campus first before they go looking for taking away a forest. I have one of the concerns that many of the other people have mentioned, and that's the increase in runoff and how that will affect the streams. The company said it will end at the property. No, it won't, because the water will continue to flow downstream into other areas, into the Potomac and into the Chesapeake Bay areas that I use for recreational enjoyment. You know, I'm not from this area. I'm from Falls Church, but then neither is Georgetown and neither is Regis. And I think there's other maybe sources of green that they could also look at. You know, some of the people have mentioned using parking lots, canopies over parking lots. There's parking lots on Georgetown that they could put canopies on. There's a large south-facing roof on Georgetown that they could put solar on. Other flat roofs that they could put solar and have in proper orientation to make a maximum use of it. So there's a lot that they can do in their own backyard before they come taking somebody else's backyard. And there's also other ways, you know, maybe one of the things to look at is wind power. It has a much smaller footprint than any solar.
those are things that should be looked at in addition, and basically you should look at already areas that are already impervious because there's either a building or a parking lot on it. You can put a canopy over, like somebody mentioned, you put a canopy over a parking lot. Brownfields that have already been deforested, areas, those type of areas to look at first before you look at something like this. I think it's the wrong project at the wrong time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathleen Murphy.
Thank you. My name is Kathleen Brophy, and I'm testifying tonight in my individual capacity as a resident of Maryland. Since growing up in Maryland, I've been able to establish myself as establish a career as a community advocate, working with citizens in resource-rich countries around the world. For over 7 years, I've had the honor of working on issues faced by Indigenous and other frontline communities that live in or near sites of oil and mineral extraction. As someone who has witnessed the devastation of the fossil fuel industry firsthand, I've become an ardent supporter of renewable energy and the need for a transition away from fossil fuel reliance. While I wholeheartedly support renewable energy, I've become increasingly disappointed as I've researched this case to see some of the remnants of the same extractivist model used by the fossil fuel industry for years, creeping into renewable energy development. I am primarily concerned with two major aspects of this project, which implicate Georgetown and Origis on the one hand and the state of Maryland on the other. According to publicly available information, the Piscataway people that are indigenous to southern Maryland and specifically Charles County have not been formally consulted at all thus far in the planned development of this project. I would like to point out that this is in contravention to the internationally recognized right of indigenous communities to free, prior, and informed consent for any large-scale land-based investment planned for their land. Since this project is planned for Piscataway ancestral land and the Piscataway community has been officially recognized as an indigenous group by the state of Maryland since 2012, I fail to understand why their rights to free, prior, and informed consent have not been respected thus far in this project. I do not find the argument that the land is privately held as particularly relevant or compelling here. The second issue that is most concerning to me is in regards to the state of Maryland's failure to protect this area since it is a targeted ecological area. According to the definition by the Department of Natural Resources, TEAs are lands and watersheds that have been identified as conservation priorities by DNR for natural resource protection. Therefore, I fail to understand why this area designated as a TEA has not been therefore protected by the stateside program Open Space that provides funding for conservation of targeted land based on ecological priorities. This forest is a critical part of Maryland's remaining green infrastructure. How can this piece of land be zoned for agricultural use when it is a TEA? Furthermore, what is the purpose of the TEA program if not to protect ecologically important areas and incentivize private landowners, as is relevant in this case, to sell privately owned land within a TEA to the state for conservation? Thank you. To be clear, in a hypothetical sense, I am not here to resist this project today only to find out that the land gets logged for timber at some future time. I'm here to oppose this and any future project in this TEA and to plead that the state government do its job here and stop undermining the intent of the TEA program in the first place. To this end, I request that the state reconsider its approval of this project and instead prioritize this land for conservation using the tools at its disposal for exactly this purpose. Furthermore, I wish that the state of Maryland would absolutely require any developer seeking a project on Piscataway ancestral land to always, in every case, require developers to seek free, prior, and informed consent from the Piscataway community. Thank you.
Hello, Liza West from Lusby, Maryland. I drove an hour to get here tonight because this is so important. I oppose this siting of this solar farm. It's a terrible site for solar farm. Our country used to be nature surrounding human development, and now it's human development surrounding nature. This is a very valuable forest for the wetlands and the wildlife and the drinking water supply. I've been sent here